The morning assembly at community primary school had just ended, and Amara was the only mother whose children were asked to step aside. Mama Chitty, Mama Ngozi, Mama Afani, your children cannot stay unless the fees are paid. 3 children, 3 pairs of eyes watching their mother collect them from the veranda, while the other pupils marched inside for milk and bread. She walked them home through the Oshodi market, past Mama Bo's frying yam till the oil sang, past the plantain sellers fanning smoke into her face. Amara, by small, your children are hungry, Mama Bo's called. Amara just waved her hand and kept walking. She had 40 naira in her purse. 40 naira could not buy half a tuber. At home, she checked her phone for the 100th time. Her husband Chuka had not called in 3 weeks. The last message read, I will send something when business improves. That was 2 months ago. The rent was 3 months behind. The landlord had stopped knocking. He just stared at her each morning. By evening, the children had eaten the last of the gari. Little Afani was crying. Not loud, just that weak whimper that comes when the belly has given up crying loud. Amara told them to lie down and sleep, that she would find something. She stepped out the back door into the narrow passage behind the compound. The soil near the drainage was damp from the morning rain. She knelt down, her wrapper soaking at the knees, and began to dig with her bare hands. The earthworms were thick there, pink and wriggling in the wet mud. She picked one up. Her hand was shaking. She closed her eyes and put it in her mouth. The taste was soil and iron and something that made her throat try to close. But she swallowed. Then another. Then another. She had been doing this for 3 weeks now. Every time the children slept, every time the hunger became a living thing that would not let her think. Behind her, a sharp gasp. Amara turned. Funk, her neighbor from the next compound, stood frozen at the corner of the building, a bowl of beans in her hands. The bowl dropped. Beans scattered across the concrete. For a long moment, neither woman moved. Amara's hands were covered in black mud. A small worm was still wriggling between her fingers. The shame rose up her chest like hot water, but the hunger sat heavier, a cold stone that had been living in her belly for weeks. Sister, Funk finally whispered. Her voice cracked. Sister, what are you doing? Amara could not answer. She just looked at her hands, at the mud under her nails, at the proof of what she had become. A mother who eats worms so her children can have the last cup of rice. A wife whose husband forgot to send money. A woman whose pride had died quietly behind a compound in Mushin. Funk did not scream. She did not run. She just dropped to her knees there in the mud beside the gutter and took Amara's trembling hands in hers. Sister, Funk whispered, her voice cracking like dry wood. Sister, how long has this been going on? Amara's shoulders shook. The words came out in pieces, like someone pulling teeth from her own mouth. 3 weeks. My body cannot take plain water anymore. My children must eat the little rice I can borrow. Funk's face changed. The shock melted into something harder, a resolve that looked almost like anger, but aimed at the world, not at Amara. Get up, Funk said, pulling Amara to her feet. You are coming with me. She led Amara through the winding streets of Mushin, past the women frying yam at their roadside stalls, past the men playing drafts under the neem tree. Amara kept her eyes down, ashamed of her torn wrapper, ashamed of the mud still caked under her fingernails. They arrived at the women's cooperative meeting. A dozen market sellers sitting on wooden benches in Madame Grace's backyard, their money purses tied inside their wrappers. Amara stood at the entrance, wanting to disappear. But Funk held her arm firm and spoke before anyone could ask questions. This woman needs help, not judgment. The women shifted on their benches. Madame Grace, the treasurer, frowned. She should have asked earlier. We cannot just give money to anyone who dash. Another woman cut in. Maybe we should call her husband's family. This is a family matter, not cooperative business. Funk turned slowly. She looked at each woman in the eye, one by one, until the murmuring stopped. Then she asked a question that landed like a stone in still water. If your own daughter was eating worms to keep her children alive, would you wait for permission? The room went silent. You could hear the generator from the next compound, the distant honking of Danfo buses on the main road. No one spoke. Madame Grace cleared her throat. She opened the cooperative's metal box and began counting. We can give her a small loan. Enough for a sack of cassava. She can start selling gari at the motor park. Amara wanted to cry, but Funk squeezed her hand and whispered, You are not alone. That is the first thing you must learn. Before the sun touched the zinc roofs of Mushin, Amara was already at the motor park, her her borrowed frying pan balanced on 3 stones, a sack of cassava flour at her feet. The first customers were drivers, their eyes skipping past her torn wrapper like it was contagious. Gary. Fresh fried Gary. Her voice cracked on the second call. A man in a blue Danfo uniform paused, looked at her hands, then walked to another woman's stall instead. Funk arrived at mid-morning with 3 other women from the cooperative. They did not ask how business was. They simply stood at her stall, bought 1 wrap each, and ate right there, talking loudly about how sweet the Gary was. Sister Amara, this one is crunchy well. You put enough groundnut oil? Funk's voice carried across the park. A woman carrying a baby on her back turned to look. Then another passenger from a waiting bus walked over. By the end of the first week, Amara had learned the rhythm. The morning rush from 6 to 8. The lunch crowd of traders who wanted something quick before the afternoon sun became wicked. She stopped counting the small earnings. She started counting the faces that returned. On the 10th day, she counted the money in her brassiere pouch. Enough for school fees. Enough for a second sack of cassava. She sat down on the wooden crate behind her stall and cried. Not the heavy tears of shame, but the quiet ones of relief. The cooperative women came every Thursday to check on her. Madame Grace would sit on an overturned bucket and ask, "Any trouble at home? Any husband trouble? Any in-law trouble?" Amara would shake her head. The only trouble now was deciding how much Gary to fry before the market closed. She repaid the full loan in 28 days. Not a month. 28 days. The women clapped when she placed the money in the metal box. Funk was the loudest. Here is the lesson that landed like a heavy stone in a still pond. Shame almost killed Amara. Not hunger. Not poverty. Shame. The belief that her suffering was hers alone to carry. But community action rebuilt her. One neighbor who refused to look away. One cooperative that said yes instead of why. Today, Amara has sent 2 other struggling mothers to that same cooperative. She buys their first sacks of cassava. She teaches them the motor park rhythm. She tells them the same thing Funk told her. You are not alone. That is the first thing you must learn.